about that. Joel Anand Samy, host of America's Roundtable and co-founder of the International Leaders Summit, is joining us now. Joel, it's nice to meet you.
A very good morning to you, Scott. It's great to be with you all with SuperTalk Mississippi Media, and truly a historic week indeed for America and the Middle East.
So kind of set the context for why this trip was so important and why President Trump may have chosen to go to these countries on his first official overseas visit.
Yes, Scott. In fact, if we remember, during President Trump's first administration, in fact, the first trip that he made, basically the international trip, was to Saudi Arabia. And he had a great speech. If you can go back to some of the files on the internet and just download that speech, basically he was communicating the importance of building a bridge between America and the Gulf states. And doing so beyond our relationship when it comes to energy with oil and things of that nature, but looking forward. And what did we see right in 2020 was actually President Trump having the UAE, one of the pioneering members of the Abraham Accords, coming together with Israel, Bahrain, Morocco, and other countries to signing this achieving goal of the Abraham Accords, bringing countries together in this very unique peace accord. And in fact, if it wasn't for the untimely and certainly unfortunate passing away of the Pope, as President Trump did go to Rome for his visit just a few weekends ago, this will be President Trump's first official visit to a number of countries. So putting into context, he, as you rightfully mentioned, he went to Saudi Arabia, he went to Qatar, and then also finished his tour in the UAE. And these three countries are dynamic countries, but importantly, he began his tour in Saudi Arabia. And we are looking at not just only a partnership on key issues, but most importantly, look at the trade that we have this great potential. When we think about Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, we sort of think about a peninsula in the Middle East. But what we have to remember is that these Arab nations are connected to 400 million citizens, 400 million consumers for the American market, and also for American exporters and companies. We've got a great potential when we look to the Middle East and to South Asia, like places like India, with a growing population of 1.4 billion people. So President Trump is leading the way on trade, on security, on strengthening economic ties with the Middle East, and it sends a very strong signal to Iran, to China, to disrupt this axis of evil, if you want to call it, or this axis of upheaval that has really caused such problems in the region and to our great trusted ally, Israel.
Well, there are so many implications for peace in the Middle East as a result of this visit and this relationship, but economically, the impact is huge. $2.5 trillion in capital for America. I think the UAE pledged to commit $1.4 trillion, Saudi Arabia at least $600 million, Qatar $500 billion. This is this investment larger than the market cap of all but three public companies in the world. It's going to have a major impact in the U.S. economy.
Absolutely, Scott. And that is going to, as we remember John F. Kennedy when he would say, the rising tide lifts all boats. And so this is going to impact every state across the country. The investment coming to America is going to fuel economic growth in America, but also create stronger ties with these Gulf states. And they are innovation centers as well. When you think about what's happening in UAE, in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and we've been there, we've been to the region, we've visited there a number of times, and we can see the dynamism that is taking place. And also, I think that's what President Trump has noticed over the years, is that close relationship is so important. Peace through strength is vital. But when countries trade with one another, when people trade with one another, there is less of a chance of friction, conflict, and wars. And I think that's the beautiful part about what President Trump is doing. And he's doing that just in the first few months of his presidency. not just only securing our border here in the United States and addressing America's economic issues, bringing inflation down, but when you see, as you've rightfully mentioned, these several trillion dollars of partnership and trade and investment coming into America, that's a big win for America and for our fellow Americans.
You know, there was a little bit of criticism coming from Democrats about the president's business dealings in those same countries, but I think it's that relationship that the president had personally with these same leaders that was that allowed him to strike some of these deals easily. Certainly knew them better than other presidents may have to be able to negotiate these deals with them.
Absolutely, Scott. And if you can remember what Biden had mentioned already in 2020 when he was running for the presidency, he basically said that I will treat the Saudis like a pariah. I will treat Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, as a pariah. And then what happened? At the end of the day, Biden, because of his policies of cutting off fossil fuel growth here in America and then pushing a very radical, extreme green energy, which we really were not able to harvest or harness at all. And that led to inflation and high energy costs. Absolutely.
Yeah,
and then when you... and as you mentioned about those
prices drop below $60 a barrel already.
Absolutely. And that goes to what you have just mentioned, Scott, so rightfully, those personal relationships. And then when we saw Joe Biden actually go to Saudi Arabia as a beggar, and that did not even, there was no real connection that Joe Biden had, in contrast to what President Trump is doing. You're right. He has those personal relationships. And it's important as the leader of the free world to have these deep relationships with people and leaders in the Gulf states, which is so vital for America's security, America's economic interests, and America's future. So President Trump is certainly doing it the right way and leading with principled leadership, rather than what we experienced over the years with Joe Biden. And also, if we go back to the Obama years, too, when our allies were undermined at every level of the way.
You know, you mentioned Biden's trip. He kind of went to Saudi Arabia hat in hand, begging them to reduce the price of oil as inflation in America was skyrocketing, and they essentially told him to pound sand. And just through President Trump's own policies, we're seeing oil prices reduce, and that's lowering the cost of goods because transportation costs are lower, and it's costing us as consumers less when we go to fill up our own trucks. So there's a certain style to that negotiating, and I want to, if you could stick around for another segment, talk about that relationship and the greeting that President Trump received, maybe even get into some of the gifts that he received, and most importantly, what it means for peace in the area. We're talking to Joel Anand Samy, host of America's Roundtable. Who's coming up this weekend, by the way, Joel?
In fact, we've got a great leader, principal leader. Tom Garrett is going to be joining us. He was a former member of Congress and a delegate currently of the Commonwealth of Virginia, a brilliant individual, and we look forward to our conversation with him. He's been into the Middle East, and he was spent some time in Ukraine and Syria as well.
And you mentioned Syria. We didn't even have a chance to get into that, but historic discussions on reducing some of the restrictions on Syria that have a major impact on the entire region as well.
Absolutely, Scott.
All right, Joel, can you stick around for another segment with us?
Absolutely. Look forward to doing so, Scott.
We're streaming live on supertalk.fm and all of our social media as well. I'm Scott Sands. Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Scott Sands in for Richard Cross. We'll be back Monday. Joel Anand Samy is joining us this morning. He's the host of America's Roundtable, co-founder of the International Leaders Summit. Before we talk about the prospects of peace and the Abraham Accords, tell me about the context of the greeting that President Trump received in all of these countries, the lavender carpet, the fighter jet escorts, MBS greeting him on the tarmac. These were all changes in protocol from other presidential arrivals.
Absolutely, Scott. And you've mentioned it well. It certainly was not what we were typically used to when you see a president of the United States visiting some of these countries in the Gulf region. And the jet fighter escort certainly was impressive for all to see. But also, you could notice the warmth, the hospitality, the connection that President Trump has developed over the years with these leaders in the Gulf state. And you can just, and as we've been there to that region too, there's a unique cultural dynamic where President Trump was received with open arms as an individual that they have great respect for. And I think that's one of the things that's so important. America is back. America is being respected and appreciated. When you compare that to what Joe Biden was known for as a very weak leader and not engaging with leaders around the world. But also you can notice the contrast that we have between the Gulf states, or say from the subcontinent of Asia, meaning South Asia, India, and other places, compared to Europe. Europe and European leaders and European citizens have really taken us for granted. But here you see a new day dawning. And the potential of trade, of cooperation, of synergy between America, the Middle East, South Asia is incredible. And great opportunities in that respect for America on the economic side as well.
Obviously, critics are going to say that they were just playing up to his ego, that he loves to compliment people regardless of who they may be. I think that's just part of his style, and you could use the adage that it's easier to catch bees with honey, or whatever the saying is. So were they trying to take advantage of President Trump by showing him all this grandeur, which he obviously soaks up?
Well, on many of our trips, when Natasha and I visit the Gulf states and spend extensive or extended time there, we sense that warmth, that hospitality, that connection that people have with one another. And I think that is certainly an eye-opener for a great number of us in the West when we go there and see this warmth and hospitality. And especially for President Trump, they know him well in the fact that it's not just a new relationship. President Trump, as a business leader, has developed relationships around the world. And as a business leader and an individual that is an unconventional politician, he knows what it is to connect with people. And he knows what it is to develop important personal relationships. And so the showering of respect and honor from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, expressed to President Trump is certainly welcoming. It's a positive sign, and it's an affirmation of our relationship with these Gulf states and the opportunity of expanding the Abraham Accords. And as President Trump had certainly received all these pledged promises of investments into the U.S. economy with these trillions of dollars that you've mentioned, Scott, importantly, we would love to see the Abraham Accords expanding with Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords. And that will be a game changer in further isolating Iran, a state sponsor of terrorism, and some of its allies, even in Eastern Europe, like Croatia, which was selling or trading Iranian oil and fueling terrorism financing. So, from that point of view, this is an exciting time, a new day dawning in the Middle East, and also for America and our fellow Americans as well.
Speaking of Natasha, where is she? Why doesn't your wife like me?
Well, she is doing double duty with a lot of other things. She looks forward to joining you, Scott, and I'm sure that day will come very soon. So she sends you and our engaged listeners on SuperTalk Mississippi Media a warm greeting and a great Friday. That's for sure. She wishes she could have been here with us today.
Oh, tell her I said hi. Well, let's get back to the Abraham Accords and peace in the Middle East. I mean, this is so critical. Israel continued to strike at Gaza this week. Yesterday, more than 100 people were killed, according to some sources. And they still, the Palestinians still hold hostages. President Trump on Air Force One said that it doesn't sound like he's as optimistic that Israel's going to be able to secure the release of any more hostages anytime soon. How do we... I mean, these countries, these cultures have been clashing for generations. Is there truly a hope that this peace can come? And obviously, the Abraham Accords play a critical role in that.
I would say that through President Trump's leadership and what he has been able to achieve thus far, the promise of peace and security and stability in the Middle East is far greater today than ever before. So, as you rightfully mentioned, Scott, about the successful Abraham Accords. In fact, as we've seen what has transpired with these Gulf states, with Saudi Arabia perhaps moving or inching closer to that, and in the conversation that President Trump had with Ahmed al-Shara, the new president of Syria, where Trump extended an invitation to al-Shara to become part of the Abraham Accords, and reportedly he said yes. And even press reports have shared that the senior Israeli Defense Forces and the National Security Council team met with Syrian regime officials in Baku, Azerbaijan, about the possibility of enlarging the Middle East Pact, which is the Abraham Accords. So a lot of good things are happening. Importantly, it will be vital for Israel to get rid of Hamas, to eliminate them once and for all. And also, as you mentioned earlier on about the price of the barrel of oil, which is now in its lower 60s at the moment, which is phenomenal. Well, what does that do? It actually lowers the revenues for Iran. It lowers the revenues for Russia. And that means they have less money to cause mischief, or in this case here, conflicts in supporting their proxies. So, President Trump's policies on all fronts, on the economic front, on the security front, on diplomacy, is making our world safer again. And I think what we will see is a de-escalation of these conflicts in the Middle East. And also, we have to keep in mind, Saudi Arabia is playing a very crucial role with the conflict resolution of Ukraine and Russia. They've played a very important role in bringing some of these key parties together with President Trump and through his leadership. So rather than having these discussions in European capitals, the discussion to end the war in Ukraine, Russia, is taking place in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So the Middle East is playing a very important role. We have a trusted ally, Israel, and we certainly appreciate our very strong partnership based on our common values, our shared interests, our shared principles. We are democratic nations that elevate the importance of the rule of law, protection of property rights, democratic states. So that partnership is secure, and we look forward to growing that for greater stability in the region. And so it's a new day with what Israel did, and actually going after Hezbollah in Lebanon, going after some of these forces in Syria. Actually, Israel is a key partner in securing peace and stability. So we spend less money on our defense budget and more money on trade.
So, Joel, and we've got limited time here, so there's no way we're going to be able to address this completely. And I'm certainly not an expert in Middle Eastern affairs, but it seems like even with the Abraham Accords and getting some of the national support for Israel's sovereignty, that we can't achieve peace with Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis all continuing to attack not only Israel but American interests. And the root of their support of Hamas and Hezbollah is coming from Iran. That seems to be the big problem in the Middle East. And not to sound overly hawkish, but shouldn't we just deal with Iran? And we've been highly unsuccessful at regime change in the past in countries like Iran. But it seems like if we could neutralize them, that's got to be the big step to achieving peace by cutting off the funding for these terror groups.
Indeed. And in fact, if we're able to limit the influence of Iran in the region, that is a great thing, not just only for the region, but for the United States as well, because, they were actually Iran was funding the Houthis. They were attacking commercial vessels, including U.S. Navy vessels. So after 53 days of strategic bombardment in Yemen, all of a sudden the Houthis came and said, listen, we've had enough. We're not going to attack any commercial vessels on the Red Sea. Neither are we going to attack U.S. vessels, Navy vessels. And so peace through strength means principled leadership. And President Trump has shown that. Under the Biden administration, we saw an emboldened Iran where they were getting billions of dollars. And just to keep this in mind, we were seeing Iran under Trump during the first administration just being able to sell 400,000 barrels of oil a day. Under Biden, it was over 3 million barrels of oil a day. So you can just imagine what they did with this extra cash in funding the Houthis, the Hamas, the Hezbollah, and creating havoc. So President Trump is certainly not just ushering a new day here in America, but all around the world. And I would love to see President Trump receive the Nobel laureate for peace for what he is doing. He is truly
I think
a
he's got a good
peacemaker.
shot at this. Hey, Joel, it's been nice to have this conversation. Nice to meet you, and I look forward to our next conversation. Joel Anand Samy, America's Roundtable on Super Talk.
Thank you, Scott.